First, I would like to introduce our presenters. We have representatives from Amnesty International, Tetyana Mazur and Bohdan Ovcharuk. They will make a presentation on extrajudicial execution during the conflict in eastern Ukraine.
During the conflict in eastern Ukraine, and we are very happy to have here Tetyana Mazur, Chief of the Amnesty International in Ukraine, and Bohdan Ovcharuk, the member of the Investigative Commission. So the floor is yours.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm not a member of the Monitoring Commission, and I'm still a prosecutor, but this mission took place with the help of, thanks to our colleagues from the team that investigates conflicts. The situation, we have a specialized research person, and because of her, that mission took place. Amnesty International since April received information of extrajudicial execution during the conflict in eastern Ukraine. First of all, it was about separatist authorities de facto, but during the last months, our attention was brought to extra court executions and of the forces that are controlled by Kiev. It's not the final information. Our goal is not to find out the number of such executions. And in this report that we present today, we documented only a limited number of cases. Amnesty International can state, and they pinpoint at 4 or more executions by the parties of the conflicts. Nothing says that there are massive killings by both sides, and the evidence they provided in this report is based on data collected by our people in the Donbass in August, September. Our representatives collected evidence from local people and victims of violation of human rights, and family members, local clerks, combatants from both sides, and journalists. I would like to remind that our previous report was about we spoke about Aidar battalion violations, and in July we gave a report on executions and kidnappings by separatists. Now we are working on the next report, and we'll consider use of shelling in the east. At the beginning of the conflict in May meant application of norms of humanitarian law that regulate military conflicts. International humanitarian law or laws of war are compulsory for all parties of the conflict, and in this case for pro-Ukrainian forces and for separatist forces. And I would like to remind that our organization believes that Russia is a part of the conflict. That's what we. The main points in this law is meant to protect people who don't participate in battles, and we speak about civilians and wounded and those who were arrested and who gave up. And there is a maximal reduction of the goal is to reduce the number of victims during military conflicts, and out-of-court executions of soldiers, of captives, members of military groups, and that is a violation of international humanitarian law. Such illegal killings, murders, that is crimes of war that should be recognized like that, and people can be brought for criminal responsibility for military crimes, and military commanders and authorities could be responsible not only for criminal orders, but for the crimes committed by their staff. Such punishments can take place if the commanders knew about such a crime, and also if they didn't take adequate measures to prevent a crime. Amnesty International started to learn the out-of-court executions committed by separatists at the beginning of the conflict in April. There were pro-Ukraine among victims. There were pro-Ukraine activists and those who were suspected that they support Kiev authorities and local criminals and arrested combatants. The first obvious proof when we found 2 bodies on the 19th of April near Gorodok in the Donetsk region. Bodies were of Volodymyr Rybat, local deputy from Batkivshchina party, and pro-Ukrainian activist Yuri Popravko, a student from Kiev. On the bodies, there were signs of tortures, and during the mission to the east, they told, 4 more arrested, they told that some those who were arrested could be killed. For example, a member of the election commission who was kept by militants in Donetsk and who treated her civilly. She told about the practice of imitation of torture with closed doors. She heard how they imitated torture, and then she found blood on her clothing. There is information about murders as punishment, and they write about that broadly. And executors, they accept responsibility in the end of May. Minister of Defense of DNR, Igor Strelkov, gave an order to kill 2 local commanders and for deflection, and also both of them were for robbery also, and they were all both murdered. And Amnesty International concerned that such executions could be done by local authorities, legal authorities. And it was informed that they passed the criminal code, and there was an article about capital punishment for heavy crimes. Such punishment is illegal and unacceptable and should not be brought to execution. But also there are murders. There are murders because of other reasons. Our people received evidence of out-of-court executions committed by militants of LNR against people who suspected that they committed crimes near Severodonetsk, Rubezhny, Lysychansk. On June 13, we found bodies of 3 men, and from 25 to 40 years old, and they were suspected they were drug traffickers. And in interview, local policemen told that on their faces there were signs of tortures, and there were shelled to the fight to the heads and to the breast. And one of them was on the bank, one was in the river, and the other one was underwater. Near we could see a gas mask in blood and a plastic bag and a pack of cigarettes, which were probably tools for tortures. And pictures in the morgue, we see the signs of tortures and broken fingers. It's not clear who's responsible for that death, but time and conditions, circumstances allows us to assume that they were killed for drug trafficking. Amnesty International collected evidence of a murder in Severodonetsk and Luhansk region committed by LNR. When Severodonetsk was under control of LNR, they captured 2 CISO, pre-trial institution, and we were told that on July 22, there were bodies of 2 people found, and when fighters from LNR were leaving the territory. The police showed that building and cameras, and where they found and cells. There were pictures, and our people also saw those cells. One person of 30 was in green dressing, and he was killed, and he was shot to his head. The other victim, a man about 20, he was naked and he was on the table. He was killed they shot him to his neck. One more person who was arrested by LNR. He told Amnesty International they brought him to the police shop, and they put him into the cell near the entrance. Next morning he woke up because of shooting, and they started militants opened the doors and started to kill people. Amnesty International calls a separatist group and representatives of authorities in Luhansk and Donetsk regions to investigate, to have an independent investigation of all out-of-court executions, including those murders committed by Dina Elena, and also to publish a result, to make public results of those executions, to guarantee that there will be no other out-of-court executions against anyone, to guarantee that nobody is tortured or treated inhumanly, to guarantee that those who participate in operations, that they should be informed on international law and national law, and which implies the responsibility for crimes.
Now I would like to give the floor to our director, Tetyana Mazur, and she will present the second part of our report. Good afternoon. Both sides of the conflict accuse each other in the killings and violations, and that is widely spread over Ukrainian and Russian mass media. Many of such pieces of information are not grounded, that even when the accusations have some real grounds, their scale is very often exaggerated. On the 23rd of September, the Russian media reported the discovery of mass graves in Komunar and Nizhnya Krynka, two adjacent villages northeast of Makeyevka in Donetsk region. 2 days before, they were controlled by Kiev forces. They informed about torturing the bodies, and Sergei Lavrov mentioned that he found more than 400 bodies in this mass grave, but Amnesty International has not received any evidence of mass killings or burial. We have seen some cases of extrajudicial killings which could be treated as military crimes. The last decade of September, the Amnesty International visited the area, and they discovered 5 graves that had 9 bodies. 5 of them were killed, most probably during the warfare. The first grave is located in the settlement Nizhnya Krynka. The photograph of that grave is on the cover of our survey. You can see the table here which says were killed for lying, and also for names of men and Russian ID. When talking to the people from Amnesty International, the people from so-called Donetsk People's Republic said that people from that group were killed during the military actions, and they were part of an intelligence group. We have not received any evidence that they were detained, and during exhumation of these bodies, we have not found the evidence of that. If that is so, then the killings were legal by Ukrainian forces. But after asking the local citizens and the civil servants, the so-called combatants from DNR, and those who saw some of these exhumations, our people found the evidence that some of our forces were related to extrajudicial killings. There are graves located close to each other on the territory of the coal mine number 22. The investigator who's responsible for the investigation confirmed that there were 4 bodies discovered there, male bodies, and the local citizens of Komunar told Amnesty International that coal mine 22 was used by different military units of pro-Ukrainian forces between 16th of September and and 24th of March. And there's no doubt that these graves were made there in this period of time. The local citizens recognized the body, which belongs to Mikita Kolomitsev. He was the volunteer of DNR. His family told that he was guarding the checkpoint, but he has never participated in active military actions. From the words of his family and the neighbors, he was hiding starting from 16th of August because he was afraid that he will be persecuted by Ukrainian forces. When his family saw him last, the Ukrainians came to his house and were interrogating his father and were trying to get access to the computer that was owned by Mikita. The mother of Kolomitsev told to the investigators that the soldiers broke the doors and were shooting inside the house. And these soldiers had the emblem of Battalion Dnipro 1. Exhumation showed that the hands of Mikita Kolomitsev were tied up in his back, behind his back. 3 more bodies are not identified, but it is obvious, but it is probable that they are the bodies of 3 local citizens who were seen last on the 11th and 12th of September. These 3 bodies are to be identified, and the circumstances of the death of these 3 people have to be investigated. It's clear that at least one of those, Mikita Kolomitsev, who was tied up during his death, is the victim of extrajudicial killing. And the data indicates that the Kiev-controlled forces are involved into this killing. So we see such cases, but not at the scale that Russian media informs. This should be stopped in any case. All cases where there are serious grounds of suspicion are to be investigated thoroughly. Our field work is very often complicated because 2 sides of the conflict hide their actions. Amnesty International has seen this problem when the representatives of organizations were interviewing the representatives of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, the medical workers. The medical workers have to inform the militia about the wounds caused because of violence, but there is the trend that they are not informing about that. The victims in the period of the separatist regime were explaining these wounds because of some accident. They were saying that they fell from somewhere, and also the authorities did not allow the local hospital to fix military wounds. And after the city became controlled by Kiev, that continues, but maybe this is done to hide the military crimes which were committed when controlled by Kiev, when the territory was controlled by Kiev. Evgeny Stapenko, the worker of Ukrtelecom, was sent to the hospital on the 15th of August and died. The death was fixed as the accident, like as if he fell from the trolley bus, but the medical workers saw the signs on the hands of a person that means that his hands were tied up before the death. The local citizens and even professional personnel, because of the understandable reasons, they are afraid to document the cases of violation of human rights. The problem with falsification of evidence or improper documentation will exist till people feel themselves protected by the law. The task to ensure legality and protection of peaceful citizens is the task of militia, but militia cannot really organize all that. And that is true when it comes to investigating the crimes executed by other side. In some cases, especially after the control was passed from was transferred from one side to another. The militiamen are considered to be traitors, and the authorities of Ukraine have to ensure that the law enforcement bodies on the territory of Ukraine the conflict will have sufficient resources and the powers to conduct operational and thorough investigation of all the cases of illegal detention, tortures, illegal killings, irrespective of who is the suspect in committing such crimes. Also, Ukrainian authorities have to provide all the means to law enforcement bodies to protect the victims from persecution and other dangers. Traditionally, we provide some recommendations in the end of the survey. Also, Amnesty International gives recommendations to the authorities of Ukraine to undertake prompt, thorough, impartial investigation of all allegations of summary killings and also officially publicize the results of these investigations and to take to court those who are guilty, to integrate into the system of command and control the voluntary battalions and other governmental forces. Everyone who participates in military and law enforcement operations, including volunteer battalions, should be informed about national and international norms which can be applied that provide for their personal and general responsibility for violating any one of these norms, to inform them about the international standards, law standards, to guarantee that the arrest and detention practices respect due process. In no circumstances should they carry out acts of arbitrary detention or enforced disappearance, ensure reparations to victims of unlawful killings, including thorough disclosure of the truth and taking steps toward ensuring that such abuses are not repeated, effectively protect victims and witnesses of abuses under investigation against reprisals, ensure that the police in areas affected by the conflict have all the necessary resources, capacity and authority. And also the recommendations to the Verkhovna Rada, which is to ratify the Rome Statute and also ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances and take the necessary steps to implement the convention at national level soon after ratification. And seek technical assistance and expertise from relevant UN special procedures in implementing its treaty and other international legal obligations pertaining to the protection of individuals in eastern Ukraine. That is all from our side. Maybe you will have some questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
Can you conclude, compare to Balkan conflict and to other conflicts? What is happening in the East in a global sense? Could you compare in percentage, in the scale, illegal killings? In the end of my presentation, my colleague Bohdan told that the goal of this report was not, or this study was not to provide numbers, to analyze the number of out-of-court killings that take place in the East, because there are some complications with the study, but any case of violation of human rights, it's not something to be allowed in the area of the conflict. Amnesty International doesn't compare countries consciously, because always there are circumstances are different under which human rights are violated. But in any case, it should not be allowed. That's why we say it doesn't matter. The number of those out-of-court killings doesn't matter. We cannot speak about massive killings, but even those cases we know about, that they should be immediately investigated. When your organization was working in the East, What was the reaction to you? Did they give you the access? Like OSCE, they don't allow to come to certain places. What was the attitude to you? In general, we spoke. There were two study missions. One was in the end of August, the other one in the end of September. And the different people participated in those studies. They didn't have any problem with access to physical access to places, and we could communicate, though. So local people, very often they are afraid to communicate. Victims are afraid. Those who are brave to speak, very often they would like to stay anonymous, and they ask us not to give their names. So there is the atmosphere of fear, but it's possible to get physical access to those places. I would like to add to what Tetyana told, that our staff went to the east and risking their life. SBU doesn't give us accreditation as to journalists, and we don't work in the framework of International Treaty of Ukraine. That's why every time our study mission is, they are very vulnerable people in the east. So we use this chance to call our authorities. For advocacy groups, they should be provided with defense, with security. They should be provided with accreditation. They should feel secure when they do their work. These results, especially about our voluntary battalions, their violation. Did you inform them? What was their reaction? Or they don't know about the results of your study? I believe that they know, because the report on IDAR, that was an information explosion, and we spoke to the leadership of the state. We had a meeting in the General Prosecution Office with the Prime Minister in September, when the General Secretary of Amnesty International was with a visit to Kiev, and that report will be sent to Ukrainian government for them to study and to take measures. And I would like to underline that the goal of this study is to prevent future abuses. That's why we just demonstrate mistakes, which are quite understandable. The conflict was unexpected, nobody was ready for that, but nevertheless, it gives a chance to correct. And any war has rules, and all the parties of a conflict should follow the rules of the war. That's why we make these studies, and we send that to the government with clear recommendations. So we speak not only about mistakes, but we also speak about how it should be. So Dnipro-1, they don't know about that yet. I cannot tell you that we cannot say 100% that those were representatives of Dnipro-1. This, according to the words of a mother of Dmitry Kolomeyets, and she saw an insignia. So there should be competent bodies of power to investigate, because we are just a law enforcement organization, advocacy group, big and influential, but nevertheless, our powers are quite limited. So our information could be a signal for competent bodies with certain powers, and to start an investigation. And we demand that investigation to be quick, operational, unbiased, and for the results to be public. I have, with violation of human rights in Crimea. Do you have studies in Crimea? Can we expect a report about violations of human rights in Crimea? Unfortunately,
the situation is such that too many issues require our attention. That's not just the East, but also the events taking place in Kiev. We have been working on the reform of law enforcement bodies, and we are trying to comment on that, but definitely the Crimea is in the focus of our attention. And we made a statement in May about persecution of Crimean Tatars, because we believe this group is the most vulnerable in Crimea, and we continue to monitor the situation, and we hope that we will have resources and opportunity to make a more substantial survey. It's difficult to say when, but besides that statement, we organized the actions of the assistance to Crimean Tatars, because their leaders have no physical access to Crimean Peninsula, and this urgent assistance is a very specific form of our reaction. We start such urgent assistance projects when there is an immediate threat, and the information about that is received by our activists from all over the world, and they start writing addresses to different competent bodies, in this case to Russian Federation, to stop such violations. And besides the case that our organization is working on is the case of Oleg Sentsov and 3 other Ukrainians who were imprisoned and who are accused in extremism, and they are now in Moscow in detention facility, and the situation is very difficult with these people from Crimea. Thank you. Thank you.